Factorial ANOVA is made up of main effects, which we talked about in the last video, and then the interaction between the factors. And interactions in ANOVA are very similar to interactions in regression, and our definition, in fact, of interactions is going to maintain, it's going to be the same. Namely, it's the effect of one factor, or the idea that the effect of one factor depends upon specific levels of another factor. Okay, so that any differences we see will be specific to the levels of the other factor. Okay, and so some examples here would be: does the difference between men and women depend upon how much they drink, right? Or does the difference between the levels of alcohol depend upon whether it was a man or a woman that drank the alcohol? Okay, those are just two ways of stating the same interaction. Okay, so just to remind yourself that when we talked about interactions in regression, we talked about interactions and their first order effects. In ANOVA, we talked about interactions in the main effects. Okay, main effects are unique to ANOVA. Okay, that idea of the effect of one variable averaging over the other, that is something that you get directly in ANOVA only. Okay. Regression itself does not have main effects, at least in this sense, right? And instead we had first order effects, and if you remember, the first order effect for B1 is the relationship between x1 and y, right? The relationship between these two things when x2 is equal to 0. And then B2 is the relationship between x2 and y when x1 is 0. So it's not averaging over, it's the effect at a specific level of the other variable. Okay, so you have to keep that straight. So as you're doing homeworks and your final project and then other things in your own research, just bear in mind whether you're working in the regression framework or the ANOVA framework when you're interpreting interactions in your model. All right, so let's just define these interactions. The interactions are going to involve the cell means, whereas the main effects that we dealt with before involved the marginal means, right? They were out here in the margins, right? We'd averaged, if we wanted to compare the marginal, or the main effect of alcohol, we compare the marginal mean for none, the marginal mean for 2 pints, the marginal mean for 4 pints, okay? The interactions are actually going to involve the cell means themselves, because that's actually where gender and alcohol kind of come together, right? And literally interact. And you can even see that in the way we write the cell mean. It's A1, B1, right? So it's the combination of both A and B plus specific levels of A and B, okay? So let's talk about the alcohol by gender interaction. If we think of it in terms of the gender difference, right? The difference between women and men, okay? Just like the main effect for alcohol, we're going to have 2 degrees of freedom. So we have basically 2 aspects to the null hypothesis, and they're written down here. Okay? So let's talk about what each of these things mean. Okay, so what we want to know is the difference between men and women and men, okay, when alcohol is 0, okay, is it the same as alcohol, or women versus men when alcohol is 2? Okay, so if we're thinking about this first part, women versus men, that's this difference right here. Right? Okay, women versus men when alcohol is 0, so that's the difference between A1, B1, and A1, B2. We want to know, is that difference equal to this difference? A2, B1, A2, B2, because that's when women versus men when alcohol is 2. Okay, 2 pints. Okay, that's the first part of it. And then the second part of it is, what about women versus men? So I'm just going to write this one in yellow. When alcohol is 2 versus women versus men when alcohol is 3. That's that one down there. So just like the main effect for alcohol, we can compare this one to this one, and then this one to this one, like we've written here. Or you can compare this one to this one, and then this one to this one, okay? Where this one means the difference. So the difference between this, and the difference between this difference and this difference. Okay, so notice that this is about differences here. Okay, so sometimes interactions can be thought of as the test of differences between differences, right? So you got two differences. Are they the same or are they equal? Okay, so that's how we define our interaction terms in an ANOVA.